hari අපි අන්තිම දවසේ කතා කරේ about permanent tissues. If you can remember, there are two main types of permanent tissues: simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissues. So when you talk about the permanent tissues, the similar feature of permanent tissues is that they have cells which cannot be divisible by cell division. That means the permanent tissues contain cells which have lost their ability of cell division, right? Permanent tissues වල තියෙන cell division එක කරන්න බැරි cells, permanent cells. And depending on the type of cells available, right, permanent tissues can be divided into two. Simple permanent in the sense, throughout the whole tissue you find only one type of permanent tissues, right? Permanent cells, right? එක type එක cells විතරයි තියෙන throughout the tissue එකේ. Complex permanent means cells varieties කීපයකින් තියෙනවා tissue එකේ. Cells varieties කීපයකින් තියෙනවා. So basically we'll be talking about simple permanent tissues afterwards, right? In this it says simple permanent tissues වල කියනවා permanent tissues composed of single type of cells are called simple permanent tissues, right? එතකොට මේ එක type එකකින් විතරක් cells තියෙන tissue එක තමයි simple permanent tissues. හරිද? ඊළඟට main thing එක මම මේක last week එකෙත් මම හිතනවා describe කරා, right? මේකේ main කතාව තමයි according to the shape of the cell. ඒ part එක ඔයා highlight කරගන්න ඕන ඔයා කරනකොට ඔක, right? According to the shape of the cell. Right, according to the shape of the cell, right? Say shape of the cell and nature of the cell wall. දැන් එතකොට simple permanent tissue එකේ තියෙන්නේ simple permanent tissue එකේ තියෙන්නේ ඔක්කොම cell division එක කරන්න බැරි cells. Simple permanent tissue එකේ තියෙන ඔක්කොම cell division එක කරන්න බැරි cells. හරිද? එතකොට ඔය cells වලින් ඔය cells ගත්තාම ඔය cell එකේ shape එක බලලා, right? ඔය cell එකේ shape එක බලලා and ඔය cell එකේ තියෙන මේ cell wall එකේ nature එක බලලා අපිට මේ simple permanent tissues categorize කරන්න පුළුවන් groups තුනකට. Simple permanent tissues categorize කරන්න පුළුවන් groups තුනකට, right? parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma කියලා. parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma කියලා groups තුනකට categorize කරන්න පුළුවන්. හරිද? ඒක මාර important fact එකක්. හරිද? right? එතකොට මේ කොහොමද මේවා simple permanent tissues categorized වෙන්නේ? simple permanent tissue එකේ තියෙන cells ඔක්කොම එක જાති. ඒ කියන්නේ tissue එක throughout තියෙන cells එකයි. එක type එකක cells. හරිද? එතකොට මේ simple permanent tissues categorized වෙනවා groups තුනකට. collenchyma, parenchyma and sclerenchyma කියලා. sorry, parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma කියලා. කොහොමද ඒගොල්ලෝ categorize වෙන්නේ? මේගොල්ලෝන්ගේ තියෙන මේ cells වල cell wall එකේ nature එක and cell එකේ shape එක ගැන consider කරනවා. right? හරි. ඊට පස්සේ අපි යනවා ඊළඟ part එකට, right? ඒකේ first එක parenchyma, right? parenchyma. මේකේ බලන්න මාර important, right? Composed of living cells. මාරම important highlight කරගන්න. මොකද අපි කතා කරා we will find the tissue which contains non-living cells. So until we find that tissue, we will have to mention that each tissue contain living cells or non-living cells. So this parenchyma tissue, which is a simple permanent tissue, contains cells that are living. Living cells තියෙන එක highlight කරගන්න ඕන. Right? It contains isodiametric cells. ඒවට නැත්තම් spherical. Right? Contains isodiametric cells or spherical cells with a large central vacuole. Okay. So then once it comes to the cells with a large central vacuole, after that immediate point, you have to understand the nucleus of this cell has to be cornered, shifted into the corner to the near to the cell wall. So we call such a cell, such a nucleus as a peripheral nucleus, right? Peripheral nucleus. So once they say that the cell has a large central vacuole, the thing which comes after that, the fact that comes after the central vacuole is that the nucleus is a peripheral nucleus. Okay, so ඒක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් හැමතිස්සෙම මෙන්න එකක්. මේ දෙක එකට වෙන්නේ. If you have a central vacuole at the middle of the cell, the nucleus has to be shifted to the corner near to the cell wall. So we call such a cell, such a nucleus as a peripheral nucleus. එහෙනම් මේකේ ඔන්න දැන් තුනක් දන්නවා. living cells තියෙන්නේ cell එකේ shape එක isodiametric or spherical shapes with a large central vacuole. The next immediate point is the nucleus is shifted towards the new cell wall. හරිද? Right. Next one, cell wall is thin and made up of cellulose. Cell wall is so what you have to understand is the cell wall is thin. Okay, you have to write something else also. Cell wall is thin. Cell wall is evenly thin. එහෙම mark කරගන්න. මේකේ cell wall එක evenly thin, right? Cell wall is thin, that's very true, but this cell wall is evenly thin. ඒක මාරම important, right? Cell wall is thin and it is evenly thin. Right, cell wall is thin and it is evenly thin. හරිනේ? කාටරි මේක ඉරේසර් එකක් පේනවා නම් මට පෙන්නන්න. Seriously. Right. Cell wall එක thin, evenly thin. මේ thin එක evenly කියලා දාගන්න. Right. ඒ කියන්නේ බලන්න මේ cell wall එක ගත්තාම cell wall එක හැදලා තියෙන plant cells වල කොහොමද cellulose වලින්. මේකේ thickness එක cell wall එකේ thickness එක similar. හැමතැනින්ම cell wall එකේ thickness එක similar වෙනස් වෙලා නැහැ. හරිද? Cell wall is made up of cellulose and the thickness of the cell wall is even, right? It's not different at different places. It has an even thickness. Okay, that's what you have to understand, right? Intercellular spaces are available, right? Intercellular spaces are available. So when you look into this picture, you can keep all the facts about this parenchyma tissue in your mind, right? Make a tarak balona, you can keep all the features of parenchyma tissues in your mind. What is the first one? Living. We know that. Living. Next one, bola cells. That means a spherical shape cells with a large spherical cell. That's 1 point. Large central vacuoles. You can obviously see that from the picture. You have a very large central vacuole. You can see that from the picture. Once out of the large central vacuole, you'll obviously know that the nucleus is going to be shifted towards the nucleus, shifted towards the cell wall. That means it's a peripheral nucleus. And you know, obviously, the cell walls of plant cells are made up of cellulose, and the thickness of this cell wall is even. You have a similar thickness in the cell wall. And the next point is intercellular spaces are available. So I said, live cells, isodiametric, which means isodiametric or else spherical shape එකක් තියෙන්නේ. Large central vacuole එකක් තියෙනවා. එහෙනම් nucleus එක peripheral region එකට shift වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. Cell wall එක හදලා තියෙන cellulose වලින් and it is evenly thickened, and then intercellular spaces are available. So here we are talking about parenchyma tissues, right? Parenchyma tissues, which contains parenchyma cells. Parenchyma tissue contains parenchyma cells. Okay, right. The next thing, locations of parenchyma, right? Fleshy parts of fruits. Okay, fleshy parts of fruits. Hold on, I just need a minute. Okay, just hold on. Right, found on fleshy parts of fruits. Okay, and then okay, ළමයි මාව ඇහෙනව නේද? Hello, කට්ටි මාව ඇහෙනවද? ඇහෙනවා sir. Right, okay. Found on fleshy parts of, again, අපි කන fruits වල fleshy parts වල හම්බෙනවා මේක parenchyma tissues, and then leaves. ඔයාලා කතා කරා නේද photosynthesis කරනකොට mesophiles ගැන. We spoke about two types of mesophyll cells, if you can remember, spongy mesophiles and pellicid mesophiles. If you can remember spongy mesophiles and palisade mesophiles, there were two types of mesophiles, right? මේ spongy mesophiles බලන්න මෙන්න මෙතන diagram එකේ දීලා තියෙනවා මෙන්න palisade mesophiles, right? මෙන්න spongy mesophiles ඔය දෙකේම තියෙන්නේ spongy mesophiles palisade mesophiles ඔය දෙකේම තියෙන්නේ parenchyma cells, right? එහෙනම් spongy mesophiles palisade mesophiles කියන දෙකේම තියෙන්නේ parenchyma. එහෙනම් මේ photosynthesis කියන function එකටත් මේ parenchyma tissues involved වෙනවා. හරිනේ? ඔළුවේ තියාගන්න, right? So then there's another location but spongy mesophiles. We commonly say mesophiles. Mesophiles කියවම වර්ග දෙකක් තියෙනවා, spongy and palisade mesophiles. Next one, cortex and the pith of the plant stem. If you can remember, we were talking about this structural plant stem on the other side. Turn to that side and see pith cortex කියලා parts දෙකක් තියෙනවා. pith cortex කියලා parts දෙකක් තියෙනවා. right? ඔය stems එක root එකේ දෙකේම cortex කියන region එකේ pith කියන region එකේ තියෙන්නේ parenchyma tissues. right? cortex කියන region එකේ stem කියන region එකේ sorry the pith and stem pith and cortex of stem එකේ root එකේ දෙකේම තියෙන්නේ parenchyma tissues. හරිනේ? right. ඊළඟට අපි කතා කරනවා seeds endosperms, right? seeds ඒ කියන්නේ endosperms වල තියෙන්නේ endosperms වල තියෙන්නේ parenchyma, right? ඕකේ endosperms වල දාලා තියෙනවා, right? මෙන්න මෙතන දාලා තියෙනවා, පොඩ්ඩක් ඉන්නකෝ, right? ඔව් මෙන්න seed එකක් මම දාලා තියෙනවා, right? බලන්න මේ seed එකේ, right? මේ seed එකේ බලන්න මෙන්න මේ endosperm කියලා තියෙන හරිය, right? ඔය seed එකේ endosperm කියලා region එකක් තියෙනවා. මේ තියෙන්නේ මේ මෙන්න මෙතන highlight කරලා මෙතනින් දා ගන්න. මෙතන තියෙන්නේ parenchyma, right? ඔතන තියෙන්නේ parenchyma. endosperm seed එකක endosperm. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් coconut එකේ වගේ නම් අපි කන coconut එක අපි කන region එක තමයි endosperm කියන්නේ, right? ඔය endosperm එකේ තියෙන්නේ parenchyma. හරිනේ? ඔතන තියෙන්නේ parenchyma, right? එතකොට ඔන්න parenchyma තියෙන region එකක්. හරිද? right. ඊළඟට තව parenchyma තියෙන තැන් ටිකක් බලන්න තියෙනවා, right? ඔන්න දැන් අපි කතා කරා parenchyma කොහෙද තියෙන්නේ? fleshy parts of fruits වල fleshy parts වල අපි කන parts වල fruits වල. ඊට පස්සේ leaves වල තියෙනවා. leaves වල basically mesophiles කියන region එකේ mesophiles දෙකක් තියෙනවා, spongy mesophiles and palisade mesophiles කියලා. and then cortex and the pith of roots and the stem. cortex and pith කියන regions දෙක roots වලයි stem එකේ දෙකේම තියෙනවා. regions දෙකේම තියෙන්නේ parenchyma. හරිනේ? ඊට පස්සේ seeds වල special තැනක් තියෙනවා which is called the endosperm. එතකොට මම seed එකක් mark කරලා දීලා තියෙනවා coconut කියන එක. coconut එකේ endosperm එක අපි කන මදේ නේ. පොල් කියලා අපි කන region එක තමයි endosperm කියලා කියන්නේ. right. okay. then the functions of parenchyma. දැන් ඔයාලට obviously මතකයිනේ මේ mesophyll cells වල තිබ්බ parenchyma. mesophyll cells වල parenchyma තියෙනවා නම් ඔන්න parenchyma involve වෙනවා අනිවාර්යෙන් photosynthesis කියන කතාව. right. එහෙනම් එයාගේ එක function එකක් තමයි right. හරි. එතකොට එයාගේ එක function එකක් තමයි photosynthesis. මේ palisade and spongy mesophills in plants and plant leaves contain chlorophyll within chloroplast. photosynthesis take place in chloroplast. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට මතක නම් අපි photosynthesis කරනකොට කතා කරා chloroplast කියන තැන තමයි chlorophyll formation එක වෙන්නේ. chlorophyll formation එක වුණොත් තමයි sunlight capture කරන sunlight වල energy එක capture කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ හින්දා plants වලින් absorb කරන water, right? plants වලින් absorb කරන water and carbon dioxide transport කරන්නේ chloroplast කියන region එකට. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ mesophyll cells වලට transport කරනවා. මොකද mesophyll cells වලින් තමයි photosynthesis කරන process එක වෙන්නේ. mesophyll cells වල තියෙන්නේ mesophyll cells කියලා තියෙන්නේ parenchyma tissues. හරිනේ? mesophyll cells වල තියෙන්නේ parenchyma tissues. right. ඊට පස්සේ food storage. parenchyma tissues are used to store food and they are called storage roots. හරිද? එතකොට මෙන්න මෙහෙමයි මේ banana and pepper fruits වල තියෙන ඕක මාක් කරගන්න. දැන් මේ සමහර මෙහෙමයි. අපි දැන් කතා කරා fleshy parts of fruits කියලා තියෙනවා. මෙතන පොඩ්ඩක් correct වෙන්න ඕන පුතේ මේ storage food storage කියන එක දෙවිදිහකට එනවා. right? සමහර plants වල food store කරන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝගේ roots වල. එතකොට roots වල parenchyma tissues තියෙනවා. සමහර plants ඒගොල්ලෝ food store කරන්නේ roots වල. එතකොට roots වල parenchyma tissues තියෙනවා. හරිද? මාරම important. සමහර plants දැන් මේ food storage ගත්තාම food storage කරන විදි දෙකක් විතර තියෙනවා. right? සමහර plants ඒගොල්ලෝගේ මේ food store කරනවා මේ in their roots. හරිද? in their roots. එතකොට ඒ roots වල food store කරන plants තමයි potato, carrot and sweet potato. හරිද? potato, carrot and sweet potato වල ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ roots වල store කරනවා food. roots වල තියෙන parenchyma tissues storage function එක දෙන්න. දැන් අපි කියවනේ fleshy parts of fruits වල තියෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ fruits වල අපි කන regions වල තියෙනවානේ parenchyma. අන්න ඒව තමයි මේ banana and pepper කියන්නේ fruits. මේ fruits වල fleshy parts. fruits fleshy parts. ඔක මාක් කරගන්න. right? There are some fruits, there are some plants which store their products of photosynthesis in their roots. So we call them as storage roots. Storage roots contains parenchyma tissues. Okay, and then there are some other plants which store their food in their fruits. So these fruits also contain parenchyma tissues. Banana and pepper are two examples of fruits where the food is stored in their parenchyma cells, parenchyma tissues. Okay, right. ඊට පස්සේ ඒක important. ඊළඟට you have to talk about these xerophytes, right? අපි ඊළඟට කතා කරනවා xerophytes. What are xerophytes? Xerophytes කියන්නේ පුතේ මේ plants which grows on deserts. මෙන්න මේක ලියා ගන්න. මේක මාර important. Xerophytes කියන්නේ plants which grows on deserts. Right? Xerophytes කියන්නේ plants which grows on deserts. Plants which grows on deserts. ඔය xerophytes වල water storage ability එකක් තියෙනවානේ. ඔය xerophyte කියන plants වල සෑහෙන ලොකු amount එකක් water store කරලා තියෙනවා. මොකද මේගොල්ලන්ට water හම්බෙන්නේ හැබැයි limited period එකකට. ඒ limited period එකෙන් පස්සේ water එන්නේ ආයෙත් තව ටික කාලෙකින්. එතකොට එතකම් මේගොල්ලන්ට water waste කරන්න බෑ. They have to conserve water. They have to minimize transpiration to prevent the loss of water from the plant in the form of water vapor. So because of that, the water is stored. If you can remember aloe vera, you could remember there's a gel-like thing in which the water is conserved inside the plant. So gel-like structure is made from these parenchyma tissues. Okay. එතකොට aloe vera, cactus වල වගේ තියෙන අර ඇතුලේ water store වෙලා තියෙන අර gel-like substance that is made up of parenchyma tissues. That is highly specified to store water in them. තේරුණාද කතාව හරියට? එතකොට aloe vera and cactus වල තියෙන අර fleshy part එක අර තියෙන නෙමෙයි. gel-like structure එක හැදලා තියෙන්නේ parenchyma tissues. කවුරු හරි aloe vera කාලා තියෙනවද? ශනුකි ඉස්සරික කාලා තියෙනවද?
ඔව් කාලා තියෙනවා.
කාලා තියෙනවා. එලිෂා කාලා තියෙනවද aloe vera?
සර්.
You like feel a watery texture with some sort of cells that is like happen cells වගේ හැපෙනවා නිකන් gel එකක් වගේ හැපෙනවානේ. That structures that අපිට හැපෙන ඒවා are parenchyma tissues. Okay, right? So you will feel that when you like bite it, basically local watery content එකක් එක්ක tissues හැපෙනවා. And those tissues are parenchyma tissues. Okay, right? Then the next thing. Then ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නව නේද herbaceous plants. You have to know these herbaceous plants, right? So you have to write this what herbaceous plants are. Write like this. Plants with a watery stem. Plants with a non-woody watery stems. Plants with a non-woody watery stems. Then samahara plants වල තියෙනවා hardwood එකක්, right? When you talk about this teak, mango, margosa, ebony and all, they have very hardwood, right? ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ මාර higher wood එකක්, woody stem එකක් තියෙනවා, right? They have a woody stem. So though you put water, though you pour water, or though you avoid pouring water into those sort of things, those sort of plants, may plant එකට මුකුත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ සෑහෙන කාලයක් යනකම්, because they have a very strong stem, right? ඔයා මේ වගේ woody stem එකක් තියෙන plant එකකට water දැම්මේ නැහැ කියලා මේ plant එක it does not get withered or wilted, right? මේ plant එකට වතුර සෑහෙන කාලයක් හම්බෙන්නේ නැතිනොත් ඒක මැරෙයි, but still the stem remains rigid. Stem remains rigid. But if you talk about these balls of plants or කූඩලු වගේ plant එකක් which has this transparent stem, which is basically watery stem, like ඔයා ඔයක මිරිකුවම ඔය චූටි සමහර plants එක තද කරපුවම චොක් ගාලා වතුර එල්ලට පයින්, they don't have wood in them, in their stem. What do they have? Just a watery stem. So a watery stem වලට මොකද කරගන්නේ? ඒ watery stems වල basically තියෙනවා මේ parenchyma. Right? Parenchyma tissues මේ watery stems වල තියෙනවා. මොකද කරන්නේ? Parenchyma tissues වල තියෙන cells අස්සේ තිබ්බ මාතකට ලොකු vacuole එකක්. What do they do? These cells fill water into their vacuole, fill liquids into their vacuole completely until the cell becomes completely fully turgid. Okay, right? Now what really happens? These cells in the parenchyma tissues, which are present inside these stems of herbaceous plants, watery stem plants, they absorb water from the roots and store in their vacuole completely, and the overall cell becomes very rigid and turgid. And a hambena mechanical strength again, the stem of these watery stem plants, herbaceous plants be erected. Now imagine that you avoid water in the plant for a few days. Imagine you avoid water in the plant for a few days. What obviously would happen, this plant would get wilted. The strength of the plant is gone, because why? The water inside of these parenchyma cells are gone, and then they cell like a shrink. This cell becomes shrinked, right? Make a shrink. Shrink would have a lot of strength than the best. And so what really happens? Stem bends. We call that the stem gets wilted, the plant gets wilted or withered, right? If you like, maybe the mass obviously all the cells would die, and then there will be no use for the plant. But before the cells die, like within 2-3 days, if you water the plant again, what would happen? The water will be absorbed by the cells, and the vacuole will be entirely filled with this water, and the cells become rigid, and then this erectness, the rigidity of the plant will be given again by the action of these parenchyma cells, basically. So these parenchyma cells, when they feel water locked into their central nucleus, and then the cell becomes turgid, they can actually provide a mechanical strength to the stem of some plants, mechanical strength to the stem of some plants. Because of that only, these plants stay rigid, right? And that's the reason where they run out of water. When they run out of water, these plants get wilted very easily. Can you guys understand that fact? කොහොමද mechanical strength එක provide කරන්න කියලා by the parenchyma tissues into these non-woody herbaceous plants. Can you understand the fact? ළමයි තේරුණාද? Hello.
Yeah.
Right. එතකොට ඕගොල්ලොන්ට parenchyma තියෙන්නේ there are only ඕගොල්ලන් basically ඉගෙන ගන්න parenchyma, that is it. Depending on the location, දැන් අපි parenchyma තියෙන locations කතා කරන්නේ මේ photosynthesis කරන්න තියෙන ක්‍රම. මේ තිබ්බේ fellowship parts තියෙනවා, ඒ කියන්නේ leaves වල තියෙනවා, ඊට පස්සේ cortex and the pith of the stem and roots, and then seeds වල තියෙනවා. ඊටත් වඩා locations වල parenchyma tissues තියෙනවා. Depending on the location, these parenchyma tissues are given with different names, right? මේ just a parenchyma, මේ chloride chyma, මේවා තමයි mesophyll cells වල තියෙන්නේ. mesophyll වල තියෙන මේවා, right? Aryan chyma, right? Within xylem parenchyma, epidermal parenchyma, mesophyll parenchyma, you have different types of parenchyma, right? Right, you have different types of parenchyma tissues. මේගොල්ලන්ගේ තියෙන basic how are they given with different names in front of this parenchyma stuff, right? That is depending on their function and basically on the location of them, right? So මේගොල්ලන්ගේ location එක අනුව their function varies, but we don't have to learn about all of this. We just basically learn about what parenchyma, where the parenchyma is found, and what uses can they bring us to bring into plants a locations or indagama, right? That's it, what we're talking about parenchyma. So but you got to keep it in your mind, depending on the location and the function, parenchyma are furthermore divided, right? Furthermore classified, but we're not going to learn about all of them, right? ඊට පස්සේ අපි කතා කරනවා collenchyma. So if you could remember the structure of the parenchyma, spherical, living, evenly thickened cell wall එකක් තිබ්බා, and cell wall is made up of this cellulose, and then large central vacuole එකක් තිබ්බා. ඒක තමයි හැමතිස්සෙම water පුරවගෙන herbaceous plants වලට mechanical strength එක දෙන්න cell එක turgid කරන්නේ. And when you have a central vacuole, the nucleus becomes shifted in towards the cell wall, so then it becomes a peripheral nucleus. and you have intercellular spaces available among the cells. So those were the basic things that we spoke about the parenchyma. And then when it comes to this discussion about collenchyma, you would find slight differences between parenchyma and collenchyma, because actually the parenchyma further modifies into collenchyma. That's what simply happens. Parenchyma and collenchyma are not differentiated from the origin. They are originally the same. But what happens when collenchyma is formed? The parenchyma tissues a little modifies a little bit, right? It becomes advanced a little bit, right? And then it turns into a different shape on the cell wall, and the overall cell shape changes. Still, it is a parenchyma, but we call it with still it a parenchyma with some modifications. So you can't anymore call it a parenchyma. We call it as a modified version, which is collenchyma, right? Okay. So simply, what you have to understand, collenchyma cell is a parenchyma cell in the past, right? collenchyma cell before now, collenchyma cell was a parenchyma cell. That's what you have to understand, right? So what really happens here? Collenchyma tissues are modified parenchyma tissues which provide the mechanical strength and support to the plant. That's very much important. It says, you have to underline this, it says collenchyma tissues are modified parenchyma that is more developed to provide mechanical strength and support to the plant. Okay, so what was the function of developing parenchyma in more advanced way? To provide more and more protection with the mechanical support, strength and mechanical support. So what you have to understand is collenchyma is more into the side of providing mechanical strength and support to the plant. Parenchyma had some other functions also, like photosynthesis, storage of food, and storage of water, like things. But when it comes to parenchyma, collenchyma, they also have some functions, but more than that, they're more into providing the mechanical support to the plant. Okay, so then you could imagine what sort of modification should it have undergone to provide more protection than parenchyma to this plant, right? Okay, here we go. This collenchyma tissue also made up of living cells. That's a very important point. You have to highlight that. Composed of living cells again. Contains a cytoplasm, nucleus, and a central vacuole. Okay, so again, what you have to understand is it contains a cytoplasm, nucleus, and a central vacuole. Whenever they say central vacuole, what you have to understand here is it is a peripheral nucleus. It is a peripheral nucleus, right? Okay, that is very much important. It's a peripheral nucleus. Whenever it says you have a central vacuole, the nucleus becomes peripheral, which is shifted towards the cell wall, right? Okay, very first thing, living cells, and then provide more mechanical strength and support to the plant. There is an advanced developed versions of parenchyma cells. And then the cells have elongated shape and a polygonal shape in cross section. Now, earlier the cell was a sphere. So when the sphere was cut from the cross section, it becomes a circle like thing. So you had like all these cells, like cells, spherical cells. And if you like go through a cross section, you would see like some elongation. But other than that, in parenchyma, basically the cells are round, right, spherical in shape. But what really happens when you move cells in collenchyma tissues? Cells in collenchyma tissues are somewhat elongated. They are somewhat elongated, and they have this polygonal shape, right? See here. See, if you see here clearly, you would observe the cells are not round in shape like before in parenchyma. Now the cells have like elongated shape, the adilawagi shape, and we call that shape an elongated shape or else a polygonal shape. Okay, so three things: provide mechanical strength and support, modified version of parenchyma, living cells, nucleus is peripheralized, right? Nucleus is peripheral, and then you have a central vacuole, and then you have elongated cells. Now the cells are like not the cells are spherical as before, right? Next one, corners of the cells are thickened, right? Corners of the cells are thickened due to deposition of extracellulose. So even when you were talking about this parenchyma tissue, you could remember there was this cellulose which came in constructing the cell wall, right? This cellulose which came into this construction of the cell wall, but the cell wall in the parenchyma tissue was even. Okay, cell wall in the parenchyma tissue was very even. But what really happens when it comes to collenchyma? The corners of the cell gets deposited with extracellulose. Corners of the cell gets deposited with the extracellulose. So now see, the corners have got more thickened. The corners are now much thickened than the other areas of the cell wall. So you have a differentiation in this cell walls of the collenchyma, right? The corners are more thickened than the other parts of the cell. Okay, right. That you have to understand, the corners of the cell walls are thickened due to the deposition of extracellulose. So here you have cellulose, here you have cellulose, and here you have cellulose plus extracellulose. You have extra cellulose deposition. That's why the cell corners are being thickened. Now just imagine, right? When we have imagine, I'm asking you to fill. I would give you this example, right? I would give you this example. See here, Mamo just to take a shopping bag, right? A shopping bag, what we commonly know. So then I've asked you to fill it with some water and then hold it. You would obviously know, like, it's not steady, that this water inside the water inside the shopping bag would move here and there. It's like it is about to get spilled, right? That happens. But now just imagine you would take another polythene bag, which is a shopping bag, and then you apply some plastic or something into the corners, four corners, plastic or something into these four corners, and then he makes this shopping bag strengthen. The four corners are like applied with some very steady something. So then the overall cell becomes very steady, right? The change in the shape of the cell would become difficult, right? So then what you have to understand, when parenchyma is converted into collenchyma, the mechanical strength that can be provided by the cell increased. The mechanical strength can be provided by the cell increased. Okay. So the simple thing is, parenchyma cells, collenchyma cells can provide more mechanical strength than parenchyma cells. Collenchyma can, right? Okay. Next one. Right. Next one. Intercellular spaces are sometimes available and sometimes not, because now when the cells get, like, when you have these round cells, obviously there would be spaces for the gases to collect. We call them as intercellular spaces, air spaces. Obviously, when because of this round shape, there would be like narrow holes, narrow empty locations where different things could get collected, right? But you have simply, let's say that there are spaces, we call them as intercellular spaces. But when it comes to this collenchyma, if you could remember, the cell got elongated. Why it got elongated? Because there was extra deposition of cellulose took place in these cells, right? So due to this extra deposition of cellulose on the corners of the cell got elongated. Now the cell shape has changed. Now there's a higher chance of these cells getting stacked in a way that then no air particles could get accumulated in between them in their cellulose spaces. There are some spaces between the cells. There are some space among the cells, but that is very very less, right? Because when they shape the when they change the change the shape of the cell from the parenchyma to the collenchyma, it becomes elongated, and it could like get into these all elongated spaces. So then you have this elongated nature of the cell, like make disappear with much amount of intercellular spaces, because the cells get much tightly packed with each other. Right, this is what simply happens. The next thing, absence in monocot plants. Okay, these collenchyma tissues cannot be found in monocot plants. If you can remember, this parenchyma was also most of the time found in dicotyledonous plants, right? Absent in monocotyledonous plants. What are monocotyledonous plants? Plants like coconut, palmyra, and then ericanut. All these are what do you call? All these are monocot plants. You can't find collenchyme in monocot plants because these tissues are mostly found in outer growing tissues of the tissues like cambium. Very much important. So if you could remember the width or the thickness of the stem, the broadness of the stem increases due to the cell division rapidly taking place in the cambium, right? So you could not find a cambium properly in this monocotyledonous plants. You would not be able to find this collenchyma tissues in monocotyledonous plants. Simply, collenchyma tissues cannot be found in what do you call monocot plants. Okay, right? That's it. So then locations. If you can remember, there was no much advantage. There was some advantage with this collenchyma tissues. So then, because of that, you have various amount of locations for these collenchyma tissues, right? These tissues form a cylindrical inner tissue. These tissues form a cylindrical inner tissue to the epidermis of herbaceous plant. Okay. Now see, let's where we can find this collenchyma. Okay. Now see here, you have the epidermis. So this is the outermost layer, which is called the epidermis. Inner to that, you have a green layer. If you could see that, and this green layer is made up of collenchyma. That green layer is made up of collenchyma. Highlight that. You have to underline that, right? Okay. So so in dicotyledonous plants, once after you pass the epidermis, you find a green layer, like you find a ring of tissues which is made up of parenchyma, which is made up of parenchyma. So if you could see the cortex of this plant, cortex, could you remember cortex? In cortex, you could find parenchyma, right? Earlier we discussed, and in the pith obviously you could find parenchyma, right? Here we go, right? Right. So if you could remember in vascular bundle, what you have, we call it cambium tissue. Oh, not vascular band, vascular bundle. We have to talk about this cambium tissue composed of uh, lateral meristems. That's not the discussion here about. Right. Where the collenchyma tissues could be found. So if you take a dicotyledonous plants and from the cross section of the plant, inner to the outer region, that means the epidermis, about like 2 layers below, you have a ring-like structure which is made up of parenchyma, sorry, collenchyma tissues. That is called the cortex. That is called the cortex. Yeah, that is not the cortex. That is collenchyma tissues. Then once you go in more inner, you would find a ring again of parenchyma tissues. We call them as the cortex. Okay, the cortex. Right. Simply, these tissues form a cylindrical inner tissue to the epidermis of herbaceous. What are herbaceous plants? Plants which grow as plants which grow not taller, right? They do not grow taller, and they have a water stem. So herbaceous plant in the sense plants which do not grow taller, and they have a water stem. If you could write that, that would be great. Okay. Perfect. Next, found in veins and midribs of dicotyledonous plants. If you could remember, this is a leaf, okay? This is a leaf, and this is the midrib, and these are veins, okay? These are veins. Now, imagine this leaf is like attached to the plant. If you just imagine there were none of these midribs and ribs were not available. There are nothing called ribs and midribs in the world, itself, right? So then what would happen to this leaf? This leaf would not steadily stay like this, but it will like bend. It will bend, like it will get it will get bent. So then there will be no maximum sunlight falls onto this leaf, and then the photosynthesis rate would get reduced. Okay, so then that's a very disadvantage. So we need to keep this leaf steady, like a spreaded, like it is getting exposed into the sun in the maximum way. So what do you have, like if you had this leaf without these veins and midribs, you have to understand this leaf is not going to uh, keep the strength of the whole surface of the leaf steady, right? So then what really happens from the nature, there is a there is a layer of uh, of ribs and midribs arranged with collenchyma tissues. Otherwise, when you have a leaf like this, the leaf would fall down, right? Leaf would like get bent, and then minimizes the exposure to the sunlight. So simply, what happens? The leaf is strengthened by the collenchyma tissues found in the parenchyma. Collenchyma tissues found in this collenchyma tissues found in this leaf. Okay, right? Collenchyma tissues found in this leaf, right? So then it provides basically the mechanical strength to the leaf. Okay, right? Of dicotyledonous, not monocotyledonous leaves, of dicotyledonous leaf, right? There are two functions. What is the first one? The tissue forms a cylindrical inner tissue to the epidermis of herbaceous stems. I just have highlighted it with you. So go through that point again. Found in veins and midribs of dicotyledonous plant. I just showed it to you. If you want, right, you can really draw it down. Note it down. That's very very good, right? So these midribs and ribs are made up of this collenchyma, right? Right? They are made of this collenchyma. Then functions of collenchyma. There are only a few functions of collenchyma. See here. Provide mechanical support. I told you that these collenchyma tissues also can fill with water in the central vacuole. Meantime, we have some cells located outside. They are like some more. Collenchyma has some technical parts which provide more strength to the cell, like where you have corners deposited extracellulose, right? So likewise, it can provide a more mechanical strength and support to the plant than parenchyma, right? Okay. So collenchyma provide mechanical support to the stems of dicotyledonous plants. So plants before the formation of wood in them. That's very important. That's very important. So, like if you have seen how a mango plant grows into a giant mango tree, you could have observed that the mango plant at the very beginning has very soft stem. Stem is not broad. Stem is very soft and it's not so strong, right? So then you have collenchyma tissues in these plants when they were like when they before they form the wood. Now a mango tree, when it gets old on it forms wood, right? So then these collenchyma tissues, they provide mechanical strength and support to the woody plant stems before formation of the wood. Like before formation of the wood, uh, strength the stem was given by collenchyma tissues. Okay, right. Next one, that is how the mechanical support and the strength is given to the plant by being present in this veins and veins and the midribs of leaves, and by being present in the dicotyledonous of dicotyledonous plants before the formation of wood in them, right? So mechanical support, that is one function, providing the mechanical support to non-woody plants when they are like still still before the formation of the wood in them. And then collenchyma tissues can be found in the veins and midribs of plant leaves to hold them directly in a way that the maximum sunlight is obtained. Right. Okay. So then this collenchyma also has got a photosynthesis function, right? So if you could remember when you like plant a banana, sorry, not a banana tree, plant a mango tree, when it grows older, right? When it grows elder, right? The stem, the woody stem, has a like gray color or brown color, right? But if you could have imagined, if you could have like seen it with real eyes, during the small stage of this dicotyledonous plants, even they become like big and mature. When they were really small, these dicotyledonous plants stems are green, right? They have a green stem in this stem, right? A green color in this stem. before the formation of wood, right? Before the formation of wood, dicotyledonous plants, before the formation of the wood, uh, you have a green color stem which contains collenchyma, right? So like when the so you have a if you have a green color stem with a green color immature stem, that would probably contains collenchyma, right? Okay, right. So then during the small days, these plant stems can carry out photosynthesis to produce food for them, right? To produce food for them. Like after the plant gets older, right? The green color nature or the parenchyma tissues from the plant stem gets fades away, right? Gets fades away, right? So those are the two functions. Photosynthesis, chloroplasts are found in parenchyma tissues of immature dicot stems. So these contain chlorophyll, which can carry out photosynthesis, right? So that's very important. That's very important. So if you have to understand parenchyma tissues are the modified version of parenchyma, right? So then here we come across this sclerenchyma. So you have a difference here. Keep it in your mind. You have a very sharp difference here. Sclerenchyma. See here. Specifications of sclerenchyma. Sclerenchyma tissues provide mechanical support and strength to the plant body. That is the main focus of this sclerenchyma tissues. Actually, parenchyma modifies into sclerenchyma. Parenchyma modified into parenchyma. Parenchyma further modifies into sclerenchyma. Right? So they are basically adapted to provide the mechanical support and strength. Nothing else, right? So these parenchyma tissues are found to provide the mechanical strength and support to the plant body, right? Sclerenchyma has two forms. That's very much important. They have two forms: sclerenchyma fibers and sclerites. That's very important, very much important. Keep that in your mind when you talk about sclerenchyma tissues. They have two types. There are two types. Sclerenchyma fibers and sclerite. Sclerenchyma fiber. That means sclerenchyma tissues can exist in two forms. I'll explain that to you when it comes to examples. Sclerenchyma tissues will exist in as sclerenchyma fibers. So obviously, you would understand this. These are found as fibers. Sclerenchyma tissues are found as fibers. Coconut fibers, you have sclerenchyma fibers. And sclerites against sclerenchyma, but not as a fiber, right? Like a dish, right? Like a structure like this, right? A flat structure which contains parenchyma tissue. So if you could relate the coconut shell contains sclerenchyma tissue, dead cells. You have dead cells in it, and the strength is very high, right? Because sclerenchyma is originally performed to provide more strength and support, right? And then coconut shells contain sclerites. Coconut shells contain sclerites, right? Next one, have no living cells. That's very important. Have no living cells. Dead cells are found. So this is the type. This is the tissue that I was talking to you about. We will find a tissue that which contains non-living cells. This is that, right? So in sclerenchyma, what really happens? There will be no living cells, because what really happens, we could remember, parenchyma was modified into sclerenchyma, so parenchyma, by extra deposition of cellulose in cell walls, corners of the cell wall. So it become developed and it got advanced into parenchyma. Now this parenchyma cell wall, parenchyma, if you could remember, the corners are extra thickened, right? Corners of the cell are extra thickened. And now what really happens? So the thickness of the cell wall was not even in the parenchyma. Now what really happens afterwards, when they're like turning into sclerenchyma, on the cell wall, lignin gets deposited. On the cell wall, lignin gets deposited. Now, once the lignin start to get deposited, what really happens? The whole living structure of the cell gets destroyed. So this is going to be the last stage of a cell, right? Where all the living components are destroyed, right? Where all the living components are destroyed. Living components are destroyed. So there will be no nucleus, no cytoplasm, no any organelles. There will be no nucleus. Basically, the place where you have the cytoplasm will be a hole. The place where you had the cytoplasm will be a hole. We call that as the lumen, right? Lumen, central lumen. We call it as the central. How the central lumen exists? Because of the deposition, because of the lignification, the living organelles die, and what remains of the cell, then lumen එකේ තියෙනවනේ. මේ තියෙන vacuole එක. Actually this was the vacuole, right? Vacuole එකේ wall එකට මොකද කියන්නේ? Vacuole membrane එකට මොකද කියන්නේ? If you can remember, vacuole membrane එකට කියන්නේ tonoplast. Vacuole එක ඇතුලේ මොනවද තියෙන්නේ? A liquid which is called the cell sap, right? Cell sap කියන්නේ අපි vacuole එක අස්තර liquid එක. Now the tonoplast exists, but it is also dead, and the liquid which was inside the cell cytoplasm, which is called cell sap, is now gone. The place where the cell sap was collected in each of the cells is now empty. So you have a lumen. You have a small hole-like structure. Quickly go for this, right? The vacuole. Now, after deposition of lignin in the cell wall, the whole cell dies. The whole amount of organelles dies in the cell, right? The total amount of organelles dies in the cells, right? So there will be no nucleus, no cytoplasm, no any other organelle, but the cytoplasm, when it got completely destroyed, but the remaining part of the cytoplasm, the central part, is called the central lumen. Okay, right. So we have to talk about that's very important, right? එතකොට තේරෙනවද parenchyma එකේ තිබ්බ even cell wall එක cellulose විතරයි තිබ්බේ collenchyma වෙද්දි cell walls වල corners වලට extra cellulose එකතු වෙලා cell wall එකේ corner එකේ strength එක වැඩි කරා දැන් ඔන්න කලින්ට වඩා strength එකක් tolerate කරන්න පුළුවන්. When it comes to collenchyma, the whole cell wall gets deposited with lignin, right? It gets deposited with lignin, lignification කියලා අපි කරලා lignify වෙන්න ගත්තාම all the living structures dies, right? All the living structures dies. So then in the middle of the cell, you had the you had the vacuole which was filled with cell sap. Then eventually cell sap gets removed, and then there is a hole. We call that as the central lumen, right? That's it, right? So dead cells are found. That's what we were talking about this the last time. Lignin is deposited on the cell walls. Okay, you have to write that one. Write that in front of this. Write that in front of this. Lignin is deposited on the cellulose cell walls. Right in front of that. Live organelles becomes dead. Live organelles inside the cells become dead. Live organelles inside the cytoplasm becomes dead, right? No living structures will be remaining after the lignification of the cell wall of the cell, right? Okay, that's the end of the cell. That is now being getting ready to provide the highest mechanical strength to the plant, right? Okay, so the next one, cells are tightly packed. Okay, cells are tightly packed. If you can remember the very first time when we were talking about this parenchyma, cells were not tightly packed. You had some spaces among them. And when it comes to collenchyma, there were some spaces, but sometimes no spaces at all. And now it comes to parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, no spaces are going to be available. They're going to be tightly packed. The cells are going to be tightly packed, very tightly packed. Okay, right. Spaces are in no intercellular spaces are found in between them. Very much important. Highlight that concept. Cell wall is evenly thickened by Q1 and then cell wall like a cellulose deposit. Because of the deposition of the cell wall, it becomes evenly thickened. Again, evenly thickened. So the parenchyma got evenly thickened with a cell wall, which contains cellulose. Second even cell wall because there were extra corners deposited with cellulose, right? We call them as extracellulose. And then when it comes to a collenchyma, sclerenchyma, the cell walls are again evenly thickened with the deposition of lignin, basically, right? Okay. So Cell wall is evenly thickened and forms a central lumen. Central lumen is what? The cell sap is gone and the protoplasm remains, so it becomes a lumen, very narrow lumen. Right. Locations. Sclerenchyma fibers. There are two forms of sclerenchyma tissues as sclerenchyma fibers where you find coconut husks, coconut fibers, and then sclerenchyma sclerides. Sclerides are found in, like I told you, in coconut shells and things like that. Right. Let's go through this. Fibers in xylem. Right. When you talk about the xylem and phloem, those are complex permanent tissues. You will have to talk about these fibers. Xylem parenchyma, phloem parenchyma. We'll be talking about it. Right. So these fibers in the xylem, which are xylem fibers, and fibers in the phloem, which are phloem fibers, and coconut fibers. Coconut fibers can hold coho, and cotton wool. If you could see this cotton wool has like fiber things. Like when you set it into fire, it gradually grows and gets burned. These fibers are right. These fibers are also sclerenchyma tissues. Coconut fibers, and then fibers of the xylem, fibers of the phloem, and then the coconut fibers, wool. All of them are sclerenchyma, examples for sclerenchyma fibers, and then examples for sclerenchyma sclerides. Now this is in endocarp of coconut. If you could see the endocarp, don't miss it, right? Endocarp is somewhere else. So this is the endocarp. If you could see endocarp, what is it? Endocarp is the coconut shell. If you can remember, if you could mention it, that's better. Coconut shell. Coconut shell coconut shell. Next one, endocarp of coconut. That's one thing that we could like analyze because I've included a picture. Kaduru mango fruits and pericarp of guava and pear fruit. So if you have eaten this pear fruit and guava, have you ever seen this guava and the pear fruit's outer surface is very much thick, right? It's very thick, and when it goes to the fleshy part, the teeth goes very well inside. That's not so thick or so strengthened, right? But the peel, okay, peel of guava, the peel, let's say peel, outer surface of guava and pear fruit is very strong, okay, right? Because you have parenchyma cells, sorry, sclerenchyma cells, right? Next, and seed coat of coffee and dates. So I hope you have experienced seed coats, especially when you're eating dates and things. Seed coating. That coating is made up of scleride coating. Right. So this is how we discuss about the three types of simple permanent tissues: parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. All of these are same. All of these are same transversion. Parenchyma turns into collenchyma. Collenchyma gets modified a little bit and turns into sclerenchyma. ඔහොම තමයි ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ තියෙන variation එක, right? Okay. So then we are talk about this xylem and phloem, right? These are complex permanent tissues, right? So when you talk about these complex permanent tissues, the very first thing that should come into your mind should be, okay, complex permanent tissues thing. So then obviously they should contain more than one type of cells. That's obvious. So this is complex permanent tissues. Complex permanent tissues, well, permanent tissues, they cannot do any more further cell divisions, and these all these tissues, xylem and phloem, both are complex permanent, right? Complex permanent in the sense the number of cells, the types of the number of cells present in the tissue will not be the same, right? So there are more than one type of cells present in the tissue. That's what we call them as complex permanent tissues. So let's read it through. Different types of cells together form the complex permanent tissue. Very important, highlight that. Different types of cells get together to form a complex permanent tissue. There are two types of complex permanent tissues in plants as a xylem and phloem. So let's we have the function of them each other when we are going through, but let's write that here. We'll mention the functions also. So xylem transport water and minerals, transport water minerals, that is xylem, transport food, transport food. Those are the two methods, two functions done by this complex permanent tissues. They have more than one type of cells inside them, right? Xylem tissues, basically what do they do is transport water and minerals over the plant. Phloem tissue, they basically transport food through the plant, through the xylem. Okay, so these are the things that we're going to study, right? We're going to compare and study about, right? Okay, so then so when you take about a cross section of a dicotyledonous plant, this is how your phloem and xylem looks like. So this is supposed to be the xylem, phloem, and yeah, this is supposed to be the phloem. This is the phloem, and this is the xylem. Sorry, this is the phloem, and this is the xylem, right? The outer part is the phloem, and the inner part is the xylem, right? So this is how it is going to be observed under a microscope, right? So we're going to talk about the monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous, xylem and phloem, right? So when you talk about the microscopic images of monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous xylem and phloem, so if you could see here, uh, if you could see here, right? Okay. So in a dicotyledonous plant, this is the observation under the electron microscope, right? And then this is the diagrammatic representation of what really it is. Okay, right? So when you take a dicotyledonous plant where you have branching stems, right? When such a stem is cut down, right? Such a stem is sliced, you could you'll be able to observe that there are like several number of cambium tissues. This don't imagine this one includes only uh, only include xylem or phloem. They include both. That's why we call them as vascular cambium, right? Sorry, vascular bundle. We call it as the vascular bundle. I'm sorry, yeah, vascular bundle, because you have xylem and the phloem both, right? So we call them as vascular bundle. I mention it, I think. Yeah, okay. You can mention it. This is the vascular bundle. There's a vascular bundle again. Vascular bundle contains a xylem and a phloem running through the stem, right? So these are the things. Dicotyledonous plant take up cambium tissues. Cambium tissues can observe they have an order, right? They have a pattern. So in every dicotyledonous plant, they have this pattern, right? Every dicotyledonous plant stem, if you observe, they have this pattern. But in some dicotyledonous, in monocotyledonous plants, if you could observe clearly, in monocotyledonous plants, there is no such arrangement of xylem and phloem, which is cambium tissues. So there's no pattern that how the xylem and the phloem tissues are arranged in a xylem, which is a complex permanent tissue, right? So you have to understand that thing, right? So in phloem, xylem, and in dicotyledonous plants, obtaining the xylem and the phloem in a pattern can be seen, but uh, in monocotyledonous plants, you can't have that pattern, right? There are different locations where xylem and phloem pops out from the structure, right? That's how it is, right? So then when we talk about this, uh, we talk about the xylem tissue, right? So basically, you can observe four types of xylem tissue. There's four types of cells in xylem tissues: xylem vessels, xylem tracheids, xylem parenchyma, and xylem fibers. Right? You could see all of these. So if you can remember, xylem fibers are sclerenchyma. You can write it over here. Xylem fibers are sclerenchyma. Xylem parenchyma, you need them. Xylem tracheids and vessels, you get to know about them. So parenchyma was known before. Sorry, sclerenchyma was known before, right? Xylem fibers contains sclerenchyma, right? Okay. Basically, next thing, Xylem tissue is made up of 4 types of different cells. That's very important. Highlight that. Xylem tissue is made up of. That's why we call it a complex permanent tissue. We have cells more than one type. Cells more than one type. Right. Okay. So we are going to talk about each one of them, a small description, right? Xylem vessel elements. So we call one type of this as xylem vessel elements, right? They're cylindrical and elongated cells. You could see that, right? Xylem, what do you call xylem vessel element? This is a vessel element. You have a cylindrical, right? You have a cylindrical an elongated shape in the cell, cylindrical and elongated shape, right? Next one. Xylem vessel elements stack on the other, and the cross walls are dissolved to make the continuous xylem vessel. So when you form the xylem vessel like what really happens? Xylem, what do you call this? Xylem vessel elements, they stack on each other, right? They stack on each other like this. They stack on each other, and then they climb. They climb up. They see C plates. We call them as C plates. But now, being this is the xylem, there's no point of transporting water, right? So then what really should do here? Erase these. Okay. Okay. So now anything can flow through this. Right. So what really happened? Xylem vessel elements are stacked on each other for a certain height, and then cross walls of the xylem, xylem tissues, cross walls of the xylem sieve tube elements. Sorry, hold on. Xylem vessel elements. I'm sorry, xylem vessel elements. Xylem vessels elements needed to be removed, right? Xylem vessel elements, the cross walls of the xylem vessel elements should be removed. So then there will be a continuous cylindrical structure is made, right? Then මොකද වෙන්නේ xylem vessel elements, xylem vessels form වෙන්න xylem vessel elements ඇවිල්ලා මෙහෙම එක උඩ එක stack වෙනවා. Right? ඊට පස්සේ මොකද වෙන්නේ? මේගොල්ලන්ගේ මැද්දේ තියෙන cell wall එක, මේ තියෙන මැද්දේ තියෙන cell wall එක disappear වෙලා what will be remaining again a tubular structure to transport water and minerals through it. Okay, tubular structure to transport water and minerals through it. That's what it says. Xylem vessel elements stack on others, and the cross walls are dissolved to make the continuous xylem vessel. You have to highlight the whole sentence. So xylem vessel elements get stacked on each other, right? And then the cross walls are dissolved. So then you have a cylindrical continuation from the right top at the tree until the bottom is reached. Okay, right. Next, the cylindrical shape of xylem vessels helps transport water in plants. So this cylindrical nature, because you have this continuity in this cylindrical nature, transportation of water is becomes comfortable, right? Right? They are non-living, right? Xylem fibers, xylem vessel elements, xylem vessel elements, not fibers, xylem vessel elements are formed from sclerenchyma, right? Sclerenchyma tissues, and these are non-living tissues. Okay, so you have to highlight non-living. Next part, right? Next part. Trachide. You have to underline, you have to highlight that. Trachide, xylem tracheids, right? So we spoke that there are 2 types of xylem, 2 types of tissues in xylem. That's why we call it a complex permanent tissue. We found one, that is xylem vessel elements. Then the second one is xylem tracheids. Tracheids are elongated spindle-shaped cells. So tracheids are this. Okay, tracheids are these. These are elongated spindle-shaped cells. Okay. They too help for the transportation of water. Now you have 2 types of tissue which can transport water in xylem vessel elements, xylem tracheids. Both of them can transport water. So you have to mention that they can both transport water. That's a very important plus point that you need to understand, right? So xylem vessel elements obviously could transport water because they have no cross walls. in their structures, right? So then xylem tracheids also has the capability of transporting water. Okay, right. Tracheids are elongated spindle-shaped cells. That's a very common thing, right? Tracheids are elongated spindle-shaped cells. They too help to transport water in plants. That's very important. Highlight that. And non-living. They're non-living. They're non-living, huh? And even the xylem vessel elements are non-living. They're not living. Okay. Then here it comes across this xylem fibers. Anything called xylem has xylem fibers. Anything called phloem had phloem fibers, right? So we're going to talk about xylem fibers. So when you have xylem fibers, there should be definitely okay, sclerenchyma, right? There should be sclerenchyma tissues, right? Okay. I'm sorry. So we were talking about tracheids, and then we came to xylem fibers. These are narrower and shorter than tracheids. Now see here, uh, xylem fibers and shorter and narrower than tracheids. These are tracheids. Okay, these are tracheids. Next one, uh, made by the xylem made by xylem sclerenchyma tissues. Now I obviously told you this is non-living and this is non-living. Tracheids are non-living, and then they contain. They also have the capability of transporting water. Okay, they also have the capability of transporting water. I'm sorry. Hold on. Yeah, we were talking about tracheids as xylem fibers. Xylem fibers are made up of fibers are made up of sclerenchyma tissues. Sorry, yeah. Then obviously non-living, right? Sclerenchyma tissues are obviously non-living. Then xylem parenchyma, right? Xylem parenchyma are there to form xylem parenchyma tissues, right? So they are living, obviously living. Xylem parenchyma cells are living cells which have a thin cell wall. Obviously, we know parenchyma has a thin cell wall. They involve in the storage of food. Now, could you remember the parenchyma has this function of storage of food? So they also sometimes store food related to the xylem, right? Okay. So xylem has 4 types of cells. What are the 4 types of cells? Xylem vessel elements. How do xylem vessel elements are formed? They are non-living type of cells. So xylem vessel elements එකට එකක් මේ වගේ stack වෙලා මේගොල්ලන්ගේ මේ තියෙන cross wall එක dissolve කරලා දානවා. Cross wall එක dissolve කරලා. So then you have a continuous tube to transport water, right? So then non-living xylem tracheids තියෙනවා, right? Xylem tracheids තියෙනවා elongated spindle shaped cells ජාතිය. ඒගොල්ලන්ට water transport කරන්න පුළුවන්. Non-living again. Then xylem fibers, you know, from what the fibers are made, obviously from sclerenchyma, non-living, right? එතකොට ඒගොල්ලන් දෙන්නේ mechanical strength එකක්, right? Shorter. එතකොට xylem fibers වලින් base කරලා දෙන්නේ xylem එකට mechanical strength. So you could mention here xylem fibers වලට ලියන්න මෙන්න point එකක්. They could provide mechanical strength. Xylem fibers provide mechanical strength to the xylem. Xylem fibers provide mechanical strength to the xylem. Then we come across xylem parenchyma. Xylem parenchyma are living cells, obviously living. They are living with a thin cell wall. Parenchyma features. They involve in the storage of food. එතකොට මේ xylem කියන complex permanent tissue එකේ. Why do we complex? Because it contains more than one type of cells. Why do we call it permanent? Because all of the cells present here are not divisible, right, by cell division. So make it in xylem parenchyma, make it in the xylem vessel elements, tracheids, and xylem sclerenchyma. That means xylem fibers. So it's not only xylem में एकम एक living cells जातिया like एकम tissue के हैं living xylem parenchyma. Okay, xylem parenchyma. Xylem walls, tracheids, and xylem fibers become dead due to lignification of the cell wall and provide support to the xylem tissues. එතකොට මේකේ තියෙන මේ අනිත් ඒවා xylem walls තියෙනවා, tracheids, xylem fibers become dead due to lignification. I told you once something gets lignified, the structures inside of it get destroyed and becomes non-living. එතකොට මේ cell walls, tracheids, fibers වලට පුළුවන් මොන lignify වෙලා තවත් එයාලා මේ stem එකේ water transportation එකට නැත්නම් මේ minerals and water transportation එකට strength එක වැඩි කරලා දෙන්න, right? Okay, right. functions of the xylem, right? Here we go across the functions. Xylem making functions hurry adui lamai. What are the functions? Transport water and minerals to the plant which are absorbed by the roots, right? Again, root taking absorb කරපු water and minerals මුළු plant එකටම distribute කරන්න transport කරන්න through the xylem and then provide mechanical support to the plant. And obviously then you හිතන්නකෝ ඔයා ගාව තියෙන herbaceous plant එකක්. Only the cells in the plant can get filled with water. The cell becomes turgid. That happens. But now if you imagine this stem with anything, and it also has this xylem, right? Xylem which transport this some amount of liquids to the stem, and it provides an extra strength, right? It provides extra mechanical strength, right? So then here we come across phloem tissues. Okay, so obviously phloem is also a complex permanent tissue. At complex permanent tissue, it contains more than one type of cells. Again, 4 types. What are the 4 types? Sieve tube elements. The thing is different. The name is different. Xylem vessel elements. Now here, sieve tube elements. Tracheids, companion cells. Xylem fibers, phloem fibers. Xylem parenchyma, phloem parenchyma. Xylem fibers, parenchyma වලින් හැදලා තියෙන්නේ. Xylem phloem and xylem parenchyma cells වලින් හැදලා තියෙන්නේ. Right. එතකොට xylem එකේ එකම එක living cell එකක් තිබ්බ xylem parenchyma other than that everything was dead. Okay. Right. Now let's talk about this sieve tube elements. Sieve tube elements are connected end to end, and the cross walls are incompletely dissolved. Holes are available to form sieve tubes. Okay, listen. Then ඔයාට මතකද xylem vessel elements. Xylem vessel elements මෙහෙම එක උඩ එක stack වුණා. Stack වෙලා cross walls වලට මොකද උනේ? Cross walls completely dissolve වුණා. Cross walls completely dissolve වුණා. මෙන්න මෙහෙම cross walls completely dissolve වුණා. හැබැයි මේ phloem එක form වෙද්දි sieve tube elements එන්නේ. Sieve tube elements completely ඔහොම cross walls destroy කරගන්නේ නැහැ. cross walls dissolve කරගන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ මෙන්න මෙහෙම වැඩක් කරන්නේ. phloem xylem එක හදද්දි xylem vessel elements වල තිබ්බ cross walls completely dissolve වෙලා continuous tube එකක් හැදෙනවා. But still when it comes to phloem එකේ තියෙන sieve tube elements එහෙම එක sieve tube element එකක් ගත්තොත් මේක sieve tube element එකක් ගත්තොත් ඔය sieve tube element එකේ මෙන්න මෙහෙම holes හැදෙනවා. Perforated වෙනවා. Right, incompletely dissolved වෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒක connect වෙනවා තවත් sieve tube element එක. එයාටත් perforate වෙනවා incompletely formed holes දෙනවා. මෙන්න මෙහෙම. Right. එතකොට කොයිම වෙලාවකත් දැන් මෙතන බලන්න මේ holes තියෙනවා. මෙන්න මේ separation එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි මේකට කියනවා sieve plate කියලා. මේකට අපි කියනවා sieve plate. ඕන ටක් ගාලා diagram එක දාගන්න. sieve plate. දැන් අපි දැක්කා xylem එක හදද්දි completely xylem එකේ xylem vessel elements dissolve වෙලා යනවා. කැඩිලා. හැබැයි එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. phloem එකේදීත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? phloem එකේදීත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? xylem එකේදීත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? ඉස්සල්ලාම ඔය තියෙන sieve plate එක, right? sleeve plate එක මේකට තමයි අපි sleeve plate කියන්නේ. sleeve tape එක dissolve වෙලා corrode වෙලා මේක දිගේ transportation එක පටන් ගන්නවා. Right, transportation එක පටන් ගන්නවා. Right. Okay, so then the next thing මෙතන again sieve tube elements are connected end to end and the cross walls are incompletely dissolved. Pores are available to form sieve tube. දැන් බලන්න මම ඔයාලට පෙන්නන example එකක් මෙතනින් මේ ඔයාලට පේනවාද sieve plate එක. මේ sieve plate එකේ pores පේනවා. දැන් මේ තියෙන පුතාලා sieve plate එකක් නේ. ඔන්න මෙතනින් උඩ තියෙන්නේ බලන්න හොඳට. මෙතනින් උඩ තියෙන්නේ තවත් phloem vessel එකක්. sieve tube element එකක්. මෙතන උඩ තියෙන sieve tube element එකක්. මේ පල්ලෙහා තියෙන sieve tube element එකක්. යාට පල්ලෙහා තියෙන sieve tube element එකක්. මෙතනදී කවදාවත් මේ sieve tube element එකේ sieve plate එකක් කියලා අපි කියන්නේ. මේ sieve plate එක 100% damage වෙන්නේ නැත. dissolve වෙන්නේ නැත. dissolve වෙන්නේ නැතනට ඒක holes හදනවා. එතකොට මේ phloem එක දිගේ දෙන දේවල් මේ holes වලින් යන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට මේ sieve plate එක තමයි කියන්නේ මේ phloem එකේ in between කියන මේ disturbances වලට. sieve plates. ඕකේ තියෙන්නේ holes perforate වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට ඕක through තමයි liquids transport වෙන්නේ plant එකේදී. right. ඊට පස්සේ cross walls with the sieve tubes are called sieve plates. right. එතකොට මෙතන මම කියවනේ sieve දැන් ඔයාගෙන් කවුරු හරි xylem එකේදී මේ xylem vessel elements වල xylem vessel elements completely dissolve. يعني ඒගොල්ලෝගේ cell wall එක completely dissolve වෙනවා. right. එතකොට මේ phloem එකේ හැම completely cell walls dissolve වෙන්නේ නැහැ. cell කියන්නේ මේ sieve plates දෙකක් connect වෙන තැන sieve tube elements දෙකක් connect වෙන තැන you will find a sieve plate with some holes in it, with some holes on it, like pores, right? So then at the sieve cross walls of sieve tubes are called sieve plates. Then that kind of sieve plate, right? Sieve plate එක කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ cross wall එකට කියන්නේ මේ sieve tube elements දෙකක් මැද දෙන cross wall එකට කියන්නේ sieve plates, right? Sieve tube transport the food, which means the sucrose, throughout the plant as a solution. Obviously, that's what happened. Sucrose in the plant is distributed by transported by the phloem as a sucrose solution. So no nucleus have I living cells then. Understand this. You will like come up, okay, every living cell should contain a nucleus. So what about red blood cells? It was living but did not contain a nucleus, right? So the same here, right? The sieve tube elements, they have no nucleus. They have no nucleus, and sieve tube elements can transport glucose solution or sucrose solution, right? So the thing is, make it in element sieve tube elements or the nucleus එකක් නෑ, හැබැයි living cells. That's those two are very important facts. So අපි sieve tube elements ගැන කතා කරනවා නම් we have things to discuss. Sieve tube elements එකට එකක් stack වෙලා ඒගොල්ලෝගේ cross walls completely dissolve වෙන්නේ නැතුව incomplete dissolve වෙලා හැදෙනවා holes. तर මේක ASCII food transport කරන්න පුළුවන් as a sucrose solution, and these holes are called sieve plate holes, and this the separation between two sieve tube elements were disrupted, stopped by having this sieve plate, right? Okay, right, and this contains no nucleus, but cells are available, right? And then now you might wonder, okay, living cell, there's a living cell with a function, and why doesn't it have a nucleus? How right? So sieve tube elements do not contain a nucleus, so they cannot control the activities by itself, right? But when you come to companion cells are elongated type of cells are in contact with sieve tube elements. See here, if you could find out companion cells, these are sieve tube elements which are in contact with the sieve tube elements which are in contact with companion cells. Companion cells can companion can so once after this sieve tube elements ඊට පස්සේ හැදෙන්නේ near to sieve tube elements there will be a structure called companion cell. There will be a structure called companion cells, okay, right? And by the variety companion cells are the nucleus, and the functions of the sieve tube elements could be monitored by this nucleus. Okay, let's read it through and then comes to the point. Companion cells are elongated type of cells that are in contact with sieve tube elements, which is very important. Highlight how the cells are, how the companion cells are controlled, how the companion cells are formed. They are elongated and they have sieve plates. We see plates in between the sieve tube elements. Next one, nucleus of the companion cells. Nucleus of the companion cells controls the activities of the sieve tube element. True නේ. දැන් මෙතන companion මෙතන තිබ්බේ xylem එකට phloem එකක් and xylem එකක් දෙකක් තිබ්බා, right? එතකොට when you come to phloem එයාට තියෙන්නේ hold on එයාට තියෙන්නේ sieve tube elements and then companion cells. Companion sieve tube elements or the nucleus are naha, right? So then companion cells වලට nucleus එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට මේ C tube element එකේ වෙන functions උත් control කරගන්නේ right ඒවට instructions හම්බෙන්නේ මේ nucleus of the companion cell right companion cell එකේ nucleus එකෙන් තමයි control වෙන්නේ C tube elements වල functions right okay nucleus of the companion cells control the activities of the C tube element. That's very important. That's very important. Highlight it. This one is also important. Companion cells are elongated type of cells which are in contact with C tube elements. That's very important also. So this contains living cells. On the phloem non-living things that was the non-living cells තුනක් හම්බුණා parenchyma xylem parenchyma xylem vessel elements and tracheids ඒ ඔක්කොම non-living හරිද ඒ ඔක්කොම non-living ඒකේ living එකට තිබෙන්නේ xylem parenchyma විතරයි දැන් මේකේ බලන්න මේකේ C tube elements of living companion cells of living and then it comes to phloem fibers you obviously know made up of sclerenchyma so these are dead cells definitely dead they found scattered in the phloem so phloem fibers as you can remember xylem provided the mechanical strength to the stem phloem also should do the same right phloem fibers also should do the same to provide the mechanical support to the stem okay to provide the mechanical support to the stem let's say right made up of sclerenchyma we knew that right that these phloem fibers are made up of sclerenchyma fibers right okay then phloem parenchyma when it comes to phloem parenchyma living cells are found and made up of parenchyma එතකොට phloem එක ගැන කතා කරනකොට there were 3 living structures what were the 3 living structures C tube elements were living companion cells were living and then phloem parenchyma was living right only the phloem fibers was non-living right had non-living cells and when it comes to xylem vessel elements are non-living they are non-living tracheids are non-living xylem fibers are non-living and xylem parenchyma cells might be available as living okay that's how it is but when it comes to phloem C tube elements are non-living companion cells are non-living phloem fibers are obviously non-living phloem parenchyma is only living right so then this is how the condition the cells in the phloem and the xylem is right so you have the functions of the phloem and the functions of the phloem tissues food produced by photosynthesis that means food is produced in the leaves of the plant so distribution of the food that those storages into different parts of the plant is done by the phloem right phloem system right phloem tissue එතකොට මේ plant එකේ leaves වලින් produce කරන ඔක්කොම food ටික overall හැමතැනටම transport කරලා දෙන්නේ phloem right okay so difference between the xylem and phloem this is very important xylem and phloem එකේ තියෙන differences right water and minerals what transported through xylem water and minerals phloem water and food this is as a sucrose solution මේකට name කරගන්න sucrose solution එකක් විතර තමයි transport කරන්නේ water and minerals in the way they are right මේක one way flow එකක් xylem එකේ තියෙන one way flow එකක් root එකකින් absorb කරලා ගන්නේවා ගහේ උඩටම එනකන් ගිහක් ඉච්චරයි හැබැයි phloem එකේ මොකද වෙන්නේ leaves වලින් produce කරපු ඒවා leaves වලින් එළියට ඇවිල්ලා storage වලදී පල්ලෙහාට එන්නත් පුළුවන් ආය storage වල තියෙනවා උවමනා වුණොත් මං කියන්නේ storage කියන්නේ cupboard වලට දාලා තියෙනව නෙමෙයි plant එකේ storage එකේ ආය plant එකේ තියෙන storage එකේ දේවල් require වුණොත් මේවා ආය පිටිපස්සට ගන්න පුළුවන් right okay so one way flow එකක් තියෙන in xylem and phloem two way flow එකක් තියෙනවා right okay two way flow එකක් තියෙනවා right එතන two way flow එකක් තියෙනවා in phloem right phloem එකේ two way flow එකක්ම තියෙනවා right ඊට පස්සේ so then you come to this part no end moles නෑ completely මේ තියෙන cytoplasm එකේ sorry මේ cell sieve tube element එකේ wall එක sieve tube element එකේ wall එක completely dissolve වෙලා right? Xylem vessel element එකේ wall එක sorry xylem vessel element එකේ wall එක completely dissolve වෙලා ඉන්න continuous flow එකක් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි මෙතන බලන්න C tube elements completely dissolve වෙලා නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ disk එකක් වගේ remain වෙලා ඒකේ holes හදලා තියෙනවා. right? ඒකේ holes හදලා තියෙනවා. right. next thing okay, that's not something you need to know. What you have to know is xylem में water and minerals transport करना, food and water. That means glucose solution is transported through the to the phloem, and minerals sort of one-way transportation inside the xylem, and minerals sort two-way transportation minerals minerals and sorry two-way transportation carbohydrates. So yeah, carbohydrates like what store as food storage methods again sucrose solution, right? So these are the things that we need to know about the difference between xylem and phloem, right? අදට මම ඔච්චරයි කරන්නේ, right? ඔය part එක මම නවත්තනවා.